I want to give you an experience that I've referenced in the past, but never in the extraordinary context we're going to learn today. And I came to understand something that's simply profound, what I'm going to call in a minute an astonishing fact. Now let me introduce something extraordinary. I decided to do some research. Something hit me like an anvil fell out of the sky last weekend when several men left us. Astonishing fact. Over the last 21 and about a half years, with all the ministers that have left, ready? Here we go, and I'm going to walk you through continent by continent and country by country. Ready? No one ever followed them out. What? You can't be serious, Mr. Peck. I'm as serious as I can be. And we've got to reconcile that with what we read. Now, we've had 2 ministers leave us in Europe in the last 21 and a half years. Not a soul followed either one of them. We've had 3 leave in Africa over the last 21 and a half years. Not a soul left with any of those 3. We've lost 1 in New Zealand, 1 in Australia. Now, maybe a wife or children went, but not a soul left with either of those, and maybe 1 in the Philippines. We've not lost any ministers ever in the Caribbean. We've not lost any ever in Latin America or in the Middle East. We've got 1 man. He's certainly been faithful with us. We've lost 5 ministers through the years in Canada. Not 1 single human being went with any of those 5 men. Not 1. Now, let's speak a little closer to home. We've had 9 ministers through the years leave headquarters, 9 of them. Not a soul went with 1 of them, as near as I can determine or anybody else. Not 1. We've had maybe 4 or 5 others who served at headquarters and left in the field. Not 1 left with them. So I started going down the West Coast. I couldn't believe it. And I went down, from Seattle all the way down to San Diego and began to examine the American West. And I could think of 1 man after another. I collated quite a list, and I thought of the number of people who left with him. It was 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Utterly different than my experience. I swept across the southern United States, and it was always zeros. But I want to be as honest as I possibly can in painting this picture. So a great proof that this is God's church, and I'll explain this in a funny way, is that nobody ever leaves with these men. Now, when you watch a man leave, I don't care what you think about him. You think he walks on water. Christ said he's a thief, a robber, a stranger, a killer, a destroyer, and a hireling. And throw in wolf. So he gave 7 different terms there. Oh, that's awfully harsh. We'll take it up with Christ because that's what Christ said. They don't care, or Christ isn't worthy to lead the church because he can't tell who cares and who doesn't. Now, these are powerful things to think about. Now, let me powerfully illustrate how they can enter another way. This is powerful. A family left this week. Actually, they didn't leave. We put them out. And I want to read an email and then describe a phone call that a couple of our ministers had with this couple. X and X, husband and wife, were in contact with 2 former ministers and were caught using their member services access to send these men information. Now, let me tell you about that couple. They're wicked-hearted, evil human beings. They did it for 10 weeks. They stayed in the church. Cunning. This is a couple. Do you think, were they sheep? Oh, there's 2 sheep who left with him. No, they're wicked-hearted, evil, lying thieves. They took what was never supposed to go out, and they should have known that these evil men they were helping were telling them they would use them and had them stay in the church. They were going to come to the feast, but you know, your sins find you out, and we discovered them and put them out. So that's a kind of an odd exception to nobody leaves rule. But they weren't sheep. Nobody could think they were. They lied repeatedly to two ministers. Just baldly lied over and over on the phone to the ministers who were talking with them. One man who left 10 weeks ago wrote us asking for his second tithe allotment that faithful brethren had sent in and told us we were unethical if we didn't send him money, this lying thief, if we didn't send him money. How incredible that the only place in the entire New Testament where people directly lost their lives because they disobeyed with God, husband and wife dropped dead in services, is because they did not obey common. Now, let me just say to the brethren, some of the men who have been in our ministry hope you're as foolish, weak, and stupid as they think you are, because they'll treat you as though you're foolish, weak, and stupid, and they desperately hope you are because they can steal tithes from you. About people like that, they don't change. Remember, my father once said, "Son, once a thief, always a thief." There are men out there who will work you like a pickpocket would work a crowd of drunks. And they come in sheep's clothing, like ministers of God, only they're ministers of Satan. Well, when Paul wrote about that in 2 Corinthians 11, he wasn't talking about Lutheran ministers. They don't come to us. He wasn't talking about the local Catholic bishop at the diocese down the street. They're talking about people who come into the church. And they're the devil's ministers. And some of them get to be apostles. We cannot and must not judge. You don't have to. Some of these men had, you know, as I'd look at them and as I worked on them, I think, what big eyes you have. And what big teeth you have, you know, because they're murderous, destructive thieves, and that's the only reason they come, said Jesus Christ. I don't say that. I would have never concluded that. I would think some of them were probably good men who went bad.